The fluorescent lights in LAX's Terminal 4 cast a sterile glare over everything, but all eyes were locked on the unmistakable silhouette of Snoop Dogg being led off the plane by two uniformed security officers. Phones were out, cameras rolling. He wasn't yelling, wasn't even arguing. Just walking, slow, composed, and me in that signature Snoop glide. But behind the tinted sunglasses, his jaw was tight. It had all started in first class 30 minutes before takeoff. Snoop had been in his seat, hoodie up, beats on, quietly bobbing his head to an old Nate Dogg track. The flight attendant, a tightly wound woman with a clipped tone, had asked him to stow his bag properly. He gave her a nod, but she didn't like that. Said he wasn't following instructions, said she felt uncomfortable, said he refused to comply. Next thing he knew, security was boarding. "Sir, we need you to step off the aircraft with us," one of them had said, not even making eye contact. "On what grounds?" Snoop had asked calmly. The answer? Mumbled policy language and vague references to federal regulations, no clear accusation. No incident, just vibes. As they walked him back up the jet bridge, he could hear whispers behind him. Wait, is that really Snoop Dogg? Damn, they kicked him off? Must have done something. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Once they got to the gate, they handed him a printout of a passenger removal report. It read like it was written before the incident even happened. "We'll be filing this with TSA," one of the security guards said stiffly. Snoop looked him dead in the eye. "You go ahead and do that." Then he walked away. The terminal buzzed with chaos. Some travelers applauded, others just shook their heads. A group of teens caught the whole thing on TikTok and were already posting hashtags. He sat down in a corner of the terminal, pulled out his phone and called Marcus, his longtime manager and closest friend in the business. "They pulled me off the damn plane, cuz," he said flatly. "What? Why?" "Attitude, that's all. Same song, new verse." There was a long pause. "They put hands on you?" "Nah, not rough, just disrespectful." "I'll get on it." "Don't," Snoop said. "I'm getting on it myself." The next morning, headlines were everywhere. Snoop Dogg removed from plane after non-compliance, with flight attendant. Celebrity disruption or racial profiling. Airline faces backlash. Snoop pulled off jet for attitude. Talk shows debated it. Twitter dissected every frame of the footage. The airline released a half apology that said nothing. "We respect all customers, but safety is our top priority." Snoop didn't comment, not right away. Instead, he flew private the next day to Atlanta for a scheduled shoot. But something had changed, not just in him, in how people looked at him. No longer just the chilled-out uncle of hip-hop. Now, a symbol. 3 days later, he made a phone call that would change everything. Not to a lawyer, not to a publicist, to a venture capital partner in the aviation industry. "I want to pull every investment we got in that airline," he said. "I want out, and I want them to feel it." "You sure?" "Dead sure." See, what most people didn't know was that Snoop, through a quiet portfolio of partners and backers, had quietly invested in a massive airline merger 2 years prior. The same airline that just escorted him off their plane like a common criminal, and his chunk, valued at just over $4 billion. As Snoop hung up the phone, he looked out over the Atlanta skyline, exhaled slowly and let the quiet speak. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. If you're hooked already, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment below. What would you have done in Snoop's shoes? The story's just getting started. By the time Marcus touched down in New York, the airline's executive floor was already in panic mode. Snoop Dogg's withdrawal hadn't been subtle. Overnight, 4 of the airline's biggest institutional backers had received legal notices of divestment. Another 2 hedge funds, smaller but loud on social media, had pulled out in solidarity, citing moral inconsistency and board practices. The total estimated pullout, $4.1 billion. And that was just the start. At 10:06 a.m., the company's general counsel, Janet Avery, entered the boardroom with a face like cold stone. "We've confirmed it," she said, setting the document folder on the polished oak table. "All shares tied to Broadleaf Holdings, that's Snoop's group, have been liquidated. 2 other firms followed suit this morning. This is not a bluff." There was a stunned silence. The CEO, Glenn Barrows, adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. This is retaliation. It's coordinated. We should put out a statement. Janet looked at him squarely. No, this is consequence. Meanwhile, Marcus was in Harlem, pacing a narrow sidewalk outside a brownstone studio where Snoop was reviewing footage for a Netflix project. The smell of roasted chestnuts from a nearby cart drifted through the cool air. "You lit a fire, man," Marcus said into the phone. They weren't ready for that. Snoop's voice was calm on the other end. They ain't ever ready till it hit their pockets. What's the next move? Let it breathe. Let people talk. Then we talk. Talk they did. Across every major news network, from CNN to The Breakfast Club to CNBC, analysts debated the fallout. Was it justified? Was this a billionaire tantrum or a principled stand? Did the airline overstep, or is this just the cost of fame? But beneath all the commentary was a deeper question the execs couldn't ignore. How did they let it get this far? Inside the airline's crisis room, repurposed from a marketing floor, a young PR manager named Talia was leading the digital damage control. She was only 27, just promoted 6 months prior, and already this was a career-defining storm. "Twitter's pushing boycott Sky West," she said to the room of mostly silent suits. "The footage has 37 million views. The narrative is clear. Snoop got profiled, and he fought back with money." An executive scoffed. "This is social media theatrics. We'll ride it out." Talia didn't blink. "You won't ride out a $4 billion pullout, not in this economy." The room went quiet again. Meanwhile, Snoop was sitting in a vinyl booth at a family-run diner in the Bronx. No entourage, no cameras, just him, a notepad, and a turkey sandwich. An old man at the counter turned and recognized him. "You that rapper, right? The one that walked off the plane?" Snoop nodded. "Damn right you did," the man said. "They think money mean you forget who you are. You didn't." Snoop smiled, shook his hand. "Appreciate you, OG." When he left the diner, Marcus met him out front. "They want to meet," Marcus said. "Who?" "The airline. A board member reached out. Said they want to discuss a path forward." Snoop nodded slowly. "Cool. Set it up." "But we ain't meeting in no boardroom. They come to me." "You sure?" Snoop looked out at the cars streaming down Grand Concourse. The noise, the grit, the rhythm of it all. "Yeah, I'm sure." For him, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the money. It was about drawing a line in public, a visible, immovable line, and daring anyone to pretend they didn't see it. And now the whole country was watching. They came to him in silence, 4 of them, dressed in the muted blues and grays of corporate contrition. It was a warm morning in Long Beach. Snoop had chosen the location, a modest event space near the marina overlooking the water, just blocks from where he'd grown up. He could have picked Beverly Hills, some slick downtown hotel suite, but no. If they wanted a conversation, it had to happen here, on his terms. Marcus opened the door and waved them in. Snoop was already seated, hands folded on the table, shades off, his gaze level. "Mr. Broadus," the lead representative said as he extended his hand. "I'm Kevin Larson, Chief Operating Officer. This is—" Snoop cut him off politely. "I know who y'all are." Kevin nodded, thrown off but not surprised. They all sat. For a long moment, no one spoke. Just the quiet hum of the AC and the distant cry of gulls outside. Then Snoop broke the silence. "Let me ask y'all one question," he said. "Y'all know who I am, right? Not just the artist, not the weed guy, the businessman, the investor. You knew who I was when I boarded that plane." Kevin cleared his throat. "Yes, sir, we were made aware after the incident." "Then tell me how someone like me gets treated like that, on my own investment." No one answered. He leaned back. "Let me help. I got pulled off for non-compliance. That what your reports say?" "Yes," another exec confirmed, this one from legal. "Non-compliance mean what?" "I ain't yell, I ain't argue. Didn't threaten nobody." "It was based on the flight attendant's perception of non-compliance. That's the word," Snoop interrupted. "Perception. See, I've been black all my life. I know how that word works." The table fell into silence again. He let it hang. Then Marcus slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, timestamps, financial data. Evidence of how quickly and brutally the divestment had impacted the airline's stock. One glance told the whole story. Kevin looked at the numbers and sighed. "We understand why you're upset, Mr. Broadus." "No," Snoop said. "You don't. But you will." Then, calmly, he laid out 3 terms. A public apology. Not vague, not sanitized. Real. Acknowledging what happened and why it was wrong. A review and overhaul of bias training for all frontline airline staff, especially flight attendants and gate security. A $25 million commitment to a travel equity fund that would improve access, representation, and safety for black and brown travelers in aviation. The executive stared at him. "That's considerable," Kevin said. "It's fair," Snoop replied. "And cheaper than letting your name rot in the streets." They didn't answer right away. But Snoop wasn't looking for a debate. "I don't need y'all money," he added. "I walked away from billions because respect ain't got a price tag. You want back in, you meet the line I drew." Marcus tapped his watch. "They've got 48 hours, he said. The meeting ended without handshakes. As they walked out, one exec muttered to another, "This wasn't negotiation, this was an education." Later that evening, as the sun dropped low over the Pacific, Snoop sat on a bench near the marina, watching the tide roll in. A group of kids spotted him from a distance. One shouted, "Ayo, Unc, you show 'em what's up." He raised a peace sign, smiling softly. Because for the first time in a long time, it wasn't about image, it was about impact, and the ripples had just begun. By noon the next day, the airline's PR inbox was in flames. Every major black media outlet had picked up the story. So had CNN, MSNBC, and even Bloomberg, who rarely touched cultural flashpoints like this. The headlines were damning. Snoop Dogg sets $25 million demand for justice in airline fallout. Corporate accountability or PR nightmare. Investors watching as airline faces ticking clock from hip-hop mogul. Behind closed doors at the airline's headquarters in Chicago, the board was fracturing. Janet Avery, their general counsel, had warned them weeks earlier to take the meeting seriously. Now she slammed the latest investor report on the table. "We lost another $700 million in market cap this morning. Our brand sentiment is at an all-time low, and we've received over 12,000 formal customer complaints, not tweets, emails, calls, bookings cancelled." Kevin Larson, the COO, pinched the bridge of his nose. "I told you the numbers weren't a bluff." Across the table, the CFO, a rigid numbers man named Roger Kilpatrick, finally cracked. "If we meet his demands, we open ourselves to copycat cases. It sets precedent." "No," Janet said sharply. "It sets a standard. There's a difference." Meanwhile, back in Long Beach, Snoop wasn't waiting. He had already met with 2 venture groups interested in creating a black-owned regional airline alternative. Small jets, affordable first class, digital first booking with a focus on underserved routes. It wasn't a joke. It was real, and it was happening. "People don't want revenge, they want options," he told Marcus as they looked over draft branding ideas in a beachfront workspace. "What would you call it?" Marcus asked. Snoop leaned back in his chair, thought for a second. "Elevation," he said. A knock at the door, a courier. He handed Marcus a sealed envelope marked "Confidential, Board Response." Snoop opened it slowly, scanning the short typed page. They had agreed, all 3 demands, in full. And at the bottom, a handwritten note from Kevin Larson. "We failed to meet you with the respect you deserved. This is our start in doing better. Thank you for forcing us to face it." Snoop nodded once, quietly. No celebration, no applause, just closure. Later that night, he posted a statement on Instagram. Black background, white text, simple and direct. "Sometimes you gotta show them your silence ain't weakness. It's calculation. I didn't do this for me. I did it so the next time someone like me boards that plane, they don't get treated like they don't belong. Elevate. Always." The post exploded. Millions of likes. Celebrities, activists, athletes, all chiming in. More than just support. It felt like a shift. News anchors called it a masterclass in leverage. Business blogs broke down how Snoop had turned humiliation into equity. College professors added the case to ethics syllabi overnight. And for the airline, they scrambled to schedule interviews, roll out training modules, and launch a campaign titled "We're Listening." But it was clear to everyone, they weren't leading, they were catching up. On a podcast a week later, Snoop was asked what gave him the strength to push through it all. He paused before answering. "My whole life, people been telling me where I can't go, what I don't deserve, from stages to boardrooms to that damn plane seat. But here's the thing, I stopped asking for permission a long time ago." He smiled. "And now they gotta ask me." The host just nodded, speechless. 6 months later, the sky looked different. The airline had honored every term. The public apology aired in a primetime broadcast and ran full page in the New York Times. The training program, crafted with civil rights consultants, became an industry model. And the $25 million travel equity fund launched with a viral campaign under a new motto: "Every seat deserves dignity." But none of that overshadowed what Snoop had built. Elevation Air, the name he'd chosen without hesitation, launched its first route from Los Angeles to Atlanta in a gleaming midnight blue jet trimmed in gold. Small fleet, boutique interiors, locally sourced in-flight meals, and a booking app designed with community reinvestment baked in. What started as a response had become a revolution. On the tarmac that morning, Snoop stood beside the first Elevation jet, hand on the fuselage, dressed not in a suit but a Crenshaw hoodie and sneakers. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, but his eyes weren't on them. They were on the crowd gathered behind the rope barrier. Teachers, nurses, artists, warehouse workers, barbers, students, regular people. People like the ones who'd stopped him on the street for months to say, "You didn't just walk off that plane, you walked for us." Marcus joined him at his side. "You good?" Snoop nodded. "Better than." The ribbon was cut. The doors opened. And the first passengers, mostly raffle winners from underrepresented neighborhoods, boarded smiling, crying, hugging flight attendants who looked like family, not strangers. Inside the terminal, Kevin Larson stood watching from a distance. He hadn't spoken to Snoop since that last letter, but he didn't come for PR. He came to see the future that had outgrown the apology. As Snoop walked toward the private gate, a journalist asked, "What would you say to the airline execs now after everything?" He paused. "I'd say thank you." The crowd quieted a little. "Not because they did right," he continued, "but because they did wrong loud enough for all of us to hear it and finally do something about it." The plane's engines started to hum. Bay breeze rippled the Elevation banner above. On board, Snoop took seat 1A, not because it was first class, but because that was the same seat he'd been pulled from 6 months earlier. Now it was his. As the plane rolled down the runway, lifting into clear skies, he looked out the window at the city that built him. Long Beach below, sun dancing off the water, and just beyond the haze, the skyline of LA, full of every fight and triumph he'd carried with him, and he smiled. Not because he won, but because the rules had changed, and this time he'd helped rewrite them. If you followed this story all the way through, you already know it wasn't just about a plane. It was about value, about dignity, about ownership of our stories and our worth. And maybe, just maybe, about how we rise when we stop asking for a seat and start building the plane. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and check out the next video on screen. It was picked just for you, and trust me, you're going to love it.